What if I told you that everything you think you know about learning is wrong? That waiting for someone to teach you is keeping you poor, stuck, and average? Here's the truth no one wants to admit. If you're not educating yourself daily, you're falling behind and life won't wait for you to catch up. Think about the last 24 hours. How much time did you spend intentionally feeding your mind? Not scrolling, not reacting, not killing time, actually learning something that moves you forward? Most people can't answer that, and that's why most people stay stuck. Today, we're breaking down 10 ruthless rules to turn yourself into a learning machine. Because in a world this competitive, ignorance isn't bliss, it's bankruptcy. The 1% rule, small daily gains. The most dangerous lie we believe about learning is that it happens in massive leaps, that one day we'll sit down for 12 hours straight and suddenly become experts. But real knowledge doesn't work like that. It accumulates quietly, almost invisibly, in the small spaces of your daily routine. That 5 minutes you spend reading while waiting for coffee, the podcast you listen to during your commute, the single page you force yourself to read before bed. These microscopic efforts seem insignificant in the moment, but they're the building blocks of mastery. Here's the math that changes everything. If you improve by just 1% each day, you don't end up 365% better after a year. Thanks to compounding, you become 7 times better. That's not linear growth. That's explosive transformation. But here's what most people miss. The 1% rule works both ways. Neglect your mind for just one day and it's no big deal. Do it consistently and you'll wake up one day to find yourself completely outmatched by those who didn't stop growing. The magic happens in the consistency, not the intensity. Reading 10 pages a day feels laughably easy in the moment. Anyone can do that. But stack those days together and suddenly you've consumed more books than 99% of people will in their lifetime. Watching one educational video seems insignificant until you realize that's 365 videos a year, an entire university education for free. The key isn't to overwhelm yourself with impossible study marathons, it's to show up daily without fail even when the progress feels invisible. Your brain is like a muscle. It grows through regular, manageable stress followed by recovery. Cramming is like trying to lift a year's worth of weights in one session. It doesn't make you stronger, it just leaves you broken. But small daily challenges, those reshape your mind permanently. The person who learns a little every day doesn't just accumulate facts, they develop a sharper, faster, more adaptable mind that can spot opportunities others miss. This is how ordinary people become extraordinary. Not through heroic efforts, but through the quiet discipline of daily improvement. While others wait for motivation or the perfect time to learn, you're stacking those 1% gains, day after day, week after week, until one day you look up and realize you've lapped everyone who thought they could sprint past you. 2. Study the living, not just the dead. There's immense wisdom in books that have stood the test of time. Those ancient truths that remain unchanged across centuries. But if that's all you're studying, you're trying to win today's game with yesterday's playbook. The world changes faster than ever before, and the strategies that worked even 5 years ago might already be obsolete. That's why you need to balance timeless principles with cutting-edge tactics from people who are winning right now. Think about it this way. If you wanted to get rich in the 1920s, studying Rockefeller would help. But if you only studied Rockefeller and ignored modern entrepreneurs, you'd miss entire industries that didn't exist in his time: tech, crypto, digital marketing. The fundamentals of wealth creation remain the same, but the application changes with each era. You need both, the roots of wisdom and the branches of current practice. This is why successful people always have their finger on the pulse of their industry. They're not just reading classics, they're consuming interviews with today's top performers, analyzing current case studies, and adapting proven principles to modern context. They understand that while human nature doesn't change, the playing field constantly does. The person who only studies history becomes a historian. The person who studies both history and current events becomes a player. The easiest way to implement this: for every classic book you read, balance it with a modern counterpart. After reading a timeless text on persuasion, listen to a podcast with a top salesperson today. Study ancient wisdom on discipline. Then watch how Olympic athletes train in 20. This dual approach gives you the depth of centuries combined with the sharp edge of what's working now. Remember, the goal isn't just to collect knowledge, but to apply it in a world that looks nothing like the past. The philosophers of old laid the foundation, but the champions of today are building the future. Learn from both, and you'll have an unbeatable advantage. The teach it test. Here's a brutal truth about learning that schools never taught you. If you can't explain a concept simply, you don't truly understand it yourself. That feeling of I get it when reading something, that's often an illusion. Real understanding only comes when you force yourself to articulate what you've learned in your own words, especially to someone who knows nothing about the topic. This is why the most effective learners adopt the habit of immediate self-teaching. After every learning session, whether it's reading a chapter, watching a tutorial, or attending a lecture, they pause and pretend to explain it to an imaginary 10-year-old. No jargon, no vague hand-waving, just crystal clear simplicity. If they stumble, if they realize there are gaps in their explanation, that's the signal they need to go back and study more deeply. The process is uncomfortable at first because it reveals all the places where your understanding is shaky. You might read a book on investing and feel confident until you try explaining compound interest in simple terms and realize you can't. That discomfort is gold. It shows you exactly where you need to focus. Most people avoid this step because it's hard work, but that's precisely why it works. The friction is where the learning happens. When you make this a non-negotiable part of your learning routine, several powerful things happen. First, you stop passively consuming information and start actively engaging with it. Your brain knows it will need to reconstruct this knowledge later, so it pays closer attention. Second, you identify your weak spots immediately instead of discovering them when it's too late, like during a job interview or when making an important decision. Third, you develop the rare ability to communicate complex ideas clearly, a skill that will set you apart in any field. This method also exposes the difference between recognition and recall. When you're reading, you recognize concepts. They seem familiar because you just saw them. But when you teach, you must recall them from memory, which is a completely different mental muscle. Recognition is easy. Recall is where mastery lives. Make this practice your secret weapon. After every learning session, close the book, shut off the video, and explain what you just learned out loud as if teaching a child. Record yourself if possible. The moments where you struggle or resort to vague language, those are your golden opportunity. Go back, study those specific points until you can explain them simply, then try again. This one habit will do more for your learning than a dozen other techniques combined. Attack weak points like a surgeon. Most people approach learning like they're strolling through a buffet. A little of this, a little of that, whatever looks tasty in the moment. Winners approach it like surgeons, identifying the diseased or weak areas and operating on them with precision until they're stronger than before. This is the difference between dabbling and transforming yourself. Here's how it works. First, you must have the courage to honestly assess your weaknesses. Not the skills you're okay at, but the ones that actually make you flinch when you think about them. Maybe it's public speaking, or negotiating, or understanding technology. Whatever makes you feel inadequate, that's your target. Most people avoid these areas because they're painful to confront, but that avoidance is exactly what keeps them mediocre. Once you've identified a weak spot, you attack it with focused intensity. If you're terrible at selling, you don't just read one book on sales and call it good. You immerse yourself. Books, courses, role-playing, real-world practice, until what was once a weakness becomes a strength. You study sales like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. Every day you dedicate time specifically to improving this one skill until you've conquered it. This approach requires brutal honesty and even more brutal consistency. You can't lie to yourself about your weaknesses, and you can't give up when the going gets tough. There will be days when you feel stupid, when you want to quit and go back to working on things you're already good at. That's when you double down. The discomfort is the signal that you're in the right place, the growth zone. The magic happens when you string together several of these surgical strikes over time. Imagine spending 3 months ruthlessly improving your weakest skill, then moving to the next one. After a year, you've transformed multiple areas of weakness into competence or even strength. After several years, you become unstoppable because you have no glaring weaknesses holding you back. This is how ordinary people achieve extraordinary growth. Not by being well-rounded, but by systematically eliminating what's holding them back. They understand that growth isn't about comfort. It's about courageously confronting what you suck at and working on it until you don't anymore. So ask yourself right now, what's the one skill that if you improved it dramatically, would change everything for you? That's where your focus belongs. 5. The 5-1 ratio, input versus output. There's a silent epidemic rotting away people's potential, what I call knowledge obesity. It's when you consume endless books, courses, and videos but never actually use any of it. Your brain becomes bloated with theories while your life remains unchanged. This is the cruel irony of modern learning. We have more access to information than ever before, yet so little of it translates into real-world results. The antidote? The 5-1 ratio. For every 5 parts learning, 1 part doing. This ratio exists because knowledge follows the same law as food. It's only valuable when digested and put to work. Reading about negotiation techniques doesn't make you a better negotiator any more than reading about push-ups makes you stronger. The magic happens in the doing, the trying, the failing, and adjusting. That's why the most successful learners build implementation directly into their study process. They don't just highlight passages in books. They immediately test those ideas in real situations. A salesperson doesn't just memorize scripts. They get on calls and practice live. A writer doesn't just study grammar. They publish daily. The implementation hour is where theoretical knowledge gets stress tested against reality. This is when you discover which concepts actually work versus which ones only sound good on paper. You'll find that some of what you learned is wrong. Some needs adaptation to your specific situation, and some is pure gold. This feedback loop is priceless because it teaches you to discern between useful information and intellectual junk food. Without it, you're just collecting mental clutter. Most people get this backward. They spend 100 hours learning before attempting 1 hour of doing, if they ever do anything at all. This creates paralysis by analysis, always preparing, never performing. The 5-1 ratio prevents this by forcing consistent action before you feel ready. It's uncomfortable at first because you'll feel clumsy applying new knowledge, but that discomfort is the price of growth. Every master was once a beginner who embraced looking foolish in exchange for getting better. Start small, but start now. Finished a chapter on persuasion? Go try those techniques in your next conversation. Watched a tutorial on graphic design? Create something ugly immediately. The quality doesn't matter at first. What matters is breaking the barrier between knowing and doing. Over time, as you maintain this ratio, you'll develop the most valuable skill of all, the ability to rapidly turn information into results. And in today's world, that ability makes you unstoppable. 6. The lost in the wilderness method. Comfort is the enemy of growth. The human brain is wired to conserve energy, which means it will only develop new capabilities when absolutely forced to. This explains why the most rapid learning happens not in classrooms, but in sink or swim situations where failure has real consequences. When you're truly lost in the wilderness, facing a challenge slightly beyond your current abilities with no easy way out, your mind activates learning superpowers you didn't know you had. This method works because necessity overrides all excuse. When you take a job where you're the least qualified person in the room, you either level up quickly or get exposed. When you commit to delivering a project before you know exactly how, you'll find solutions you never would have discovered through passive study. The pressure creates focus. The fear of failure fuels creativity, and the lack of a safety net forces resourcefulness. These are the conditions under which people make quantum leaps in capability. History's greatest innovators and leaders all put themselves in wilderness situations regularly. They didn't wait until they felt fully prepared. They created circumstances where preparation was no longer optional. This explains why some people develop more skill in 1 year of intense, real-world challenge than others do in a decade of comfortable study. The difference isn't talent, it's environment. One forces growth, the other permits stagnation. The key is finding the right level of challenge, far enough outside your comfort zone to stretch you, but not so far that you're completely overwhelmed. Start by identifying areas where you're competent but not exceptional. Then seek opportunities that require just slightly more than you currently have. Apply for that stretch role. Take on that client project in a new area. Say yes to that speaking engagement even though public speaking terrifies you. The initial discomfort is the sign you're in the right place. What makes this method so powerful is that it changes your relationship with fear. Instead of something to avoid, fear becomes your compass, pointing you toward exactly the experiences that will grow you the most. Over time, you develop the confidence that comes from repeatedly being in over your head and finding you can swim. This is how ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things. Not by waiting until they're ready, but by putting themselves in situations where readiness is the only option. Curate your mental diet like your life depends on it, because it does. The mind, like the body, is shaped by what it consumes. You would never pour motor oil into the gas tank of a fine automobile and expect it to run. Yet every day, countless people do the mental equivalent of this, flooding their consciousness with noise, distraction and idle nonsense, and then wondering why they feel lost, scattered, unfulfilled. Understand this truth. The quality of your thoughts shapes the quality of your life. The world you inhabit, the results you achieve, the identity you come to believe in, all of it begins with what you consistently feed your mind. You become what you think about most of the time. And what you think about most of the time is a direct reflection of what you allow into your mental space. There is no escaping this principle. There is no shortcut around it. No magic formula, no 5-minute fix. Just as the body requires clean fuel to operate at its highest level, so too does the mind. And just as eating processed junk food loaded with sugar and artificial chemicals leaves the body sluggish, tired, and prone to disease, so does mental junk leave the mind confused, anxious, reactive, and unfocused. The price is high, and the cost is paid in lost potential, wasted time, and quiet misery. You see, the tragedy is not that people are incapable of greatness. The tragedy is that they drown out their greatness before it can even emerge. They wake up and the first thing they do is flood their awareness with the noise of 1,000 voices. A scroll through social media, a barrage of notifications, a dive into headlines engineered to provoke outrage. They let everyone else's priorities take control of their attention. They allow the thoughts of others to hijack their own. The mental diet becomes fast food for the soul, addictive, empty, and toxic. But you must choose differently. You must decide, not casually, but with conviction, that your mind is sacred, that it is not to be polluted, that it deserves only the highest quality fuel. This decision, if made deeply enough, will change everything. It will reshape how you live, what you notice, and what you attract into your life. Start here. Pay attention to how you feel after you consume something. A video, a podcast, a conversation, a post, a book. Do you feel energized, inspired, clear, or do you feel heavy, drained, confused? Your emotions are the feedback loop. They are the dashboard warning lights of the mind. When you feel scattered, ask what you've been feeding yourself. When you feel discouraged, ask what voices you've been listening to. When you feel numb, ask how much of your attention has been spent reacting instead of creating. And then begin the purge. Cut the noise, not because you're better than it, but because you're done with it. Unfollow accounts that promote comparison, drama, and superficiality. You don't owe your attention to anyone who wastes it. Delete apps that are engineered to steal your focus and sell it to the highest bidder. They are not neutral tools. They are designed to addict you. Take back control. Turn off notifications. Reclaim your ability to choose where your energy flows. Next, create a space, mental and physical, where high-quality thoughts can thrive. Fill your surroundings with the voices of wisdom. Listen to thinkers who challenge you, who awaken your imagination, who make you uncomfortable in the best way. Read books that stretch your understanding. Watch content that speaks to your potential, not your limitation. Talk to people who live on the level you aspire to. Not just successful people, but principled people. People of integrity, clarity, and purpose. And here's the secret most never realize. Once you tune your mind to a higher frequency, you begin to attract information that matches it. You begin to see patterns where others see chaos. You begin to notice opportunities others miss entirely. Your attention becomes a magnet, and what it draws in reflects what you've been putting out. This is not mysticism, this is cause and effect. Input shapes thought, thought shapes action, action shapes results. Let no one convince you that this is a small thing. It is the root of all transformation. You could change your job, your habits, your goals, but if you do not change the stream of thoughts flowing through your consciousness, nothing else will hold. The mind is the gatekeeper of destiny. Guard it with the same intensity you would guard your home from an intruder, because make no mistake, low-quality thoughts are the thieves of greatness. And above all, remember this: what you feed your mind in private will show up in your results in public. You will rise to the level of your inner world. If you fill your mind with distractions, you will live a distracted life. If you fill it with purpose, focus, and truth, your life will begin to mirror those things. The world responds not to what you say, but to the energy you bring, and that energy comes from the thoughts you dwell on the most. So treat your mind like the garden that it is. Remove the weeds, plant the seeds, water them daily, guard the soil, trust the process, and never forget, your mental diet is not a luxury. It is not something to work on when you have time. It is the very foundation of the life you're building. Your future depends on it, your peace depends on it, your fulfillment, your power, your clarity, they all depend on the thoughts you allow to take root. Curate your mental diet like your life depends on it, because it does. 8. The who not how shortcut. There comes a point in every journey when effort alone is no longer enough. When grinding harder doesn't take you further, it just wears you down. You start with fire, yes, ambition, hunger, the will to conquer. You take pride in doing things yourself. You say, I'll figure it out, and maybe you do. You spend hours trying, Googling, guessing, failing. You feel noble about it, but deep down there's a gnawing truth you can't shake. This is slow. This is inefficient. This is not the path to mastery, it is the detour. The truth is simple. You do not need to know how to do everything. You only need to know who can show you the way. And once you grasp this, really grasp it, the game changes. You were not meant to climb every mountain blindfolded. You were not meant to walk every road alone. Yet most people do, out of pride or fear, or a quiet belief that they must earn success by suffering through every step of the process. But that's not how the greats rise. That's not how excellence is achieved. If you study any high performer, in any field, you'll find one common pattern. They sought out the who. Coaches, mentors, experts, teammates, people who had already been where they wanted to go, people who could shorten the distance between ignorance and insight. Now understand this. Seeking help is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is humility. And it is speed. Every hour you spend trying to learn something on your own that someone else has mastered over years is an hour you could have been using to build, to apply, to grow. The road to excellence does not require more solo suffering. It requires leverage, and people are the highest form of leverage. So what do? You start with the vision. You get clear, crystal clear about where you want to go. Not vague dreams, not general hopes, precision. And once you have that vision, you ask not how can I do this, but who already knows how to do this, and how can I learn from them? Then you move with intent. You reach out. You ask questions. You invest your time, your money, your energy. You study their pattern. You don't just watch what they do. You ask why they do it. You don't just read their books. You pay attention to what they didn't say. You don't just admire their success. You reverse engineer it. You study their decisions, their mistakes, their system. You let their experience collapse the timeline of your learning. And here's the part most overlooked. You don't have to know them personally to learn from them. The world is overflowing with access, books, podcasts, interviews, behind-the-scenes content. If someone has built something you admire, chances are they've left a trail of clues. If you're hungry enough, humble enough, relentless enough, you can piece it together. The knowledge is there. It's never been more available. The question is, will you seek it out, or will you keep pretending you have to do it all on your own? Let go of that ego. It's a trap. The idea that doing it the hard way is somehow more noble than doing it the smart way, that's pride masquerading as virtue. And pride, when unchecked, becomes the anchor that drowns potential. The greatest minds in history stood on the shoulders of others. They borrowed brilliance. They learned from giants. They knew that the fastest path to mastery was paved not by isolated effort, but by intentional collaboration. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You need to learn from the person who already built the wheel, tested it, improved it, and then teach you how to roll. Now you may say, but I don't have access. I don't know anyone at that level. And that may be true for now, but access is built. It is earned through curiosity, through initiative, through value. Ask questions that show depth. Reach out with respect. Offer something in return, your energy, your execution, your willingness to do what others won't. That is currency. And in a world drowning in noise, sincere effort cuts through fast. And if you do have the means, pay for the shortcut, hire the coach, join the mastermind, buy the course, not as a consumer, but as an investor. When you pay attention. You show up different. You execute faster. People say you can find everything online for free, and they're right. But the free path often costs the most in time, and time is your most finite resource. When you shift your mindset from how do I figure this out to who can help me solve this fast, you unlock speed, clarity, and momentum. You start stacking wins. You stop spinning in circles. You stop guessing and start building, because now you're pulling from the experience of others. You're tapping into decades of wisdom in a matter of hours. That is power. That is leverage. That is the real shortcut. But remember, finding the who is not the end of the journey, it's the ignition. You still have to move. You still have to act. Learning from others does not excuse you from doing the work. It ensures the work is directed, efficient, and aligned. It is not a substitute for discipline. It is the multiplier of it. So if you're stuck right now, ask yourself, what am I trying to do all by myself that someone else has already mastered? And then go find them. If they're out of reach, find the next closest person, then the next. Each step up the ladder opens new views. Each conversation, each insight, each borrowed breakthrough gets you closer to your own. In the end, success doesn't go to the one who knows the most. It goes to the one who learns the fastest, executes the sharpest, and moves with clarity. That clarity comes not from endlessly searching for how, but from finding who. The shortcut is real. It's not easy, but it is faster. Find your who, let them show you the how, and then go further than either of you imagine. The Morning War Room, there's a window, small but powerful, that opens at the start of each day. A sacred opportunity that, if seized, can shift the entire trajectory of your life. It is not found in meetings or emails, not in notifications or news feeds, but in the first 30 minutes after you rise. That quiet moment before the world rushes in. That is where the foundation of greatness is laid. That is your war room. You see, most people wake up and immediately surrender their attention. They grab their phone before their feet even touch the ground. They check emails, skim headlines, scroll social media, and in doing so, they hand over control of their mind to everything outside of them. They enter the battlefield already defeated, because their mind has been hijacked by noise before clarity could be claimed. They react before they create. They consume chaos before they can center themselves in purpose. And then they wonder why the day feels scattered, why focus is fleeting, why they can't seem to find their rhythm. But the elite, the focused few, move differently. They understand that the first 30 minutes of the day are not just minutes. They are a mission. They do not begin the day in distraction, but in preparation. They enter the war room of their mind with intention. While the masses check notifications, they check into growth. While others absorb noise, they absorb knowledge. They understand the law of momentum, that the first thoughts of the day shape the energy of the day. What enters your mind in the morning sets the tone for everything that follows. It's not just about information, it's about identity. When you begin the day with learning, real learning, you declare to your mind and to the world that you are a person of direction. You choose what enters your consciousness. You decide what your brain absorbs, and that decision compounds. A single page of truth, read every day, carries more power than hours of aimless consumption. A single new idea, explored while the world still sleeps, has the power to unlock creativity, sharpen clarity, and elevate performance throughout the day. So ask yourself, what does your morning look like? Not what do you hope it looks like. What does it actually look like? Be honest. Is it reactive or intentional? Are you pouring knowledge into your mind or just reacting to the mental crumbs of others? If your morning is chaotic, your day will reflect that. But if your morning is strong, focused, purposeful, your day becomes a reflection of that inner command. This is not about adding more to your schedule. It's about subtracting the things that weaken you. You don't need to spend hours in study. You need 30 undiluted minutes of clarity. 30 minutes of feeding your mind with ideas that stretch you, books that sharpen you, content that challenges you. Not entertainment, not gossip, not opinion, but wisdom. That kind of input sharpens the edge of your thinking. And in this world where distraction is currency, a sharp mind is your ultimate advantage. And here's the truth. It's not about the knowledge itself. It's about what that ritual of learning does to your identity. Every morning you invest in growth. You reinforce the belief that you are not here to drift. You are here to rise. That belief shapes your posture. It shapes your tone. It shapes how you walk into rooms, how you speak, how you create. Because you know deep down that while others were distracted, you were sharpening. While others were scrolling, you were studying. And that confidence cannot be fake. It's built in silence, one morning at a time. Let this be your new non-negotiable. Your first 30 minutes belong to you, not the world, not your inbox, not the algorithm. You rise early, not because it's fashionable, but because it's strategic. You feed your mind, not because it's academic, but because it's empowering. You prepare your spirit, not because it sounds good, but because the world will test it. And you refuse to enter the battlefield unarmed. The war room is not a place, it is a mindset. It is the recognition that you are in control of your mind, your time, your life. And that control begins the moment you wake. You may not control everything the day throws at you, but you do control how you start it. And if you win the morning, you've already claimed an edge over night. It's not about being better than them, it's about becoming better than your former self. So build your war room, fill it with wisdom, make it sacred, defend it with everything you have, because in those first 30 minutes, you are either feeding your power or feeding your weakness. There is no neutral ground. Control your mornings, and you will control your life. 10. The lifetime student mindset. There is a quiet death that begins the moment a person believes they've arrived. Not a physical death, but a death of drive, of curiosity, of hunger. The moment you begin to think you've learned enough, that you've seen enough, that you've become enough, that is the precise moment your growth begins to decay. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle, it's invisible, but it's real. And by the time most people realize it, they've already become relics of their former selves. You must guard your mind against this illusion. The illusion that learning is a phase, that growth is a chapter, that mastery is a destination. It is not. It never has been. The greatest danger is not ignorance, it's arrogance disguised as knowledge. The belief that you are done, that there's no more to explore, that you've heard it all before. That is the beginning of mediocrity. Stay hungry, not because you lack, but because you know what's possible. Stay foolish, not because you are unwise, but because you know the wisest people never stop asking questions. This mindset, the mindset of a lifetime student, is not a gimmick. It's the key to longevity, to relevance, to evolution. The world is not static. It moves, it shifts, it reinvents itself daily. If you stop learning, you fall behind. Not because the world punishes you, but because it outpaces you. Think about the people you admire, truly admire. The leaders, the innovators, the thinkers, who seem to always be at the edge of what's next. They never stopped learning. They never stopped asking. They never stopped becoming. They read, they listened, they questioned. Not because they had to, but because they couldn't imagine not doing it. They weren't content with what they knew yesterday, because they knew tomorrow demanded more. You must decide who you want to be. The person who rests on what they've done, or the person who reaches for what's still possible. And don't mistake comfort for peace. The world will always offer you comfort when you stop stretching. It will flatter you. It will reward you just enough to make you settle. But don't take the bait. The moment you settle, you start to shrink. Adopt the identity of the student. Wear it with pride. Let every room you enter be a classroom. Let every challenge be a teacher. Let every failure be feedback. And above all, be curious. Curiosity is not weakness. It is power. It is the hunger of the soul reaching for more life. When you ask questions, you open doors. When you seek answers, you step forward. And when you remain teachable, truly teachable, life has no choice but to keep giving you more. There will always be those who mock the learner, who act as if they've seen it all, who carry themselves like finished products. Let them pretend. But you stay open, you stay raw, you stay humble, because the ones who know the most often speak the least. They're not proving anything. They're absorbing, evolving, preparing for what's next. And one day, when the world marvels at your mastery, you'll know the truth, that mastery wasn't a peak, but a practice, that you never arrived. You just kept showing up to the classroom of life, one lesson at a time, one insight, one question, one upgrade. So never stop learning, never stop listening, never stop becoming. The world will pass by those who stand still, but it will open to those who keep walking. Be the latter, be the student for life. Look around. Every person you admire is a relentless learner. They didn't wait for schools, bosses, or luck to educate them. They took full responsibility for their own growth. The internet put all of human knowledge in your pocket. The only question left is, what excuse could possibly be good enough for not using it?